One of the biggest changes in my life came in my 50s, in the middle of my menopause. There is this misconception of menopausal stages, especially for women. How demonized has menopause been in the Western world? Is you're in your menopause, you're screwed. You're going downhill. There's nothing else that you're gonna do with your life. It's like, listen up, bro. I'm gonna tell you something. I have done more progress in my life, in every single aspect of my life, in my 50s than my 20s, 30s, and 40s combined. Being vulnerable, sharing my story of loss of worth, being lost in myself, demonizing myself, not finding any worth in my life, believing my word was not worth anybody's attention. How horrible is to have a life like that versus I am in my 50s and I keep on dancing to the beat of my own drum, but this drum became an orchestra, a symphonic orchestra of beautiful different instruments that I picked up and I actually used them for the better good of myself.
I'm honored to welcome an inspiring individual, Blanca E. Rodriguez, whose life mission is to help others improve their quality of life. Blanca was born and raised in New York City, the youngest of three siblings with proud roots in Puerto Rico. Her life took a transformative turn at the age of 8 when she tragically lost her father, a pivotal moment that forever shaped her journey. Blanca is a holistic life coach, a certified massage therapist, an expert in canine massage, and a passionate fitness instructor who specializes in Zumba for individuals aged 55 and older. She's also the co-author of a best-selling book and sought-after speaker, dedicating her life to promote mental health, wellness, and healing, especially for those impacted by childhood trauma. What's particularly powerful about Blanca's story is her role as a wounded healer. Drawing from her experiences of profound loss and trauma, Blanca's transformed her pain into passion for serving others, showing people that change, not chance, is what leads to a better life. She brings a unique perspective to everything she does, from her coaching to her volunteer work, whether it's survivors of sexual violence, rescuing animals, or advocating for ocean protection. Blanca's energy is contagious, and she deeply believes in the healing power of music, laughter, and dance as tools for transformation. In this episode, we'll dive into topics close to our heart, like the long-term effects of childhood trauma, how to foster mental wellness at any age, and why physical activity is such a vital part of the healing process. Blanca's story and expertise are sure to have you feeling both inspired and empowered. Blanca E. Rodriguez, welcome to the Transcendent Minds Podcast.
Thank you so much, Peter, for having me here. What a joy and an honor this moment is.
Thank you. The feeling is mutual. Your life took a traumatic turn when you lost your father. If you'll allow me, let's start there. You lost your father at a young age of 8, and this traumatic event shaped your perspective on life and eventually led you to become a wounded healer. Despite the challenges, you've channeled your experiences into a powerful force for helping others. Can you describe how losing your father at such a young age impacted your childhood and your outlook on life?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. I appreciate it tremendously. Research has shown that 2/3 of all children from all over the world will have a traumatic experience, whether it is the sudden loss of a loved one, being bullied in school or by family members, or sexual assault. I experienced all of these by the time I was 9 years old. Life was amazing before my father's passing. He was a business owner. He conquered the American dream. We were in New York City. We moved from Puerto Rico, this exodus of Puerto Ricans to the United States in the end of the 50s, beginning of the 60s. And life was beautiful. My father conquered the dream, business owner. Oh my God. He was striving, doing beautiful things for others as well, because he was a very generous man. I cannot honor enough about him until tragedy struck. His life was taken tragically. An armed robbery gone terribly wrong in his jewelry store took his life. He was only 43 years old. He was in the pinnacle of his life, and life was never the same again. My poor mother, I honor her tremendously as well. She went into a deep depression and she never recovered from it. Later on in life, I learned my mother was suffering from chronic, untreated mental illness. And it was the time, it was on the early 70s, where mental illnesses was taboo. I grew up in an environment and in a culture where it was, shh, you don't talk about the dead, because it doesn't make anybody any favors, when of course it's total opposite. But I grew up in that environment of silence, of you don't cry. If she is the little one, she doesn't know what's going on, because I am the youngest of 3 siblings. So of course I heard this over and over. She's the little one. She doesn't understand what's going on. I understood more than anybody could imagine what was going on. And I understood one thing. I was lost with my father. My father was my person at that time of my life, and he still is my person even upon his death many years later. I didn't know how to cope with so much tragedy, so much sadness with the loss, and I felt isolated, neglected, abandoned. There was no support. That's why I said my poor mother, she did what she could with the little tools that she had at that time. That is something I understand now. But back in 1973, I didn't understand anything that was going on. And why would everybody just drift away, standing alone in the middle of a room full of people, and nobody cared to ask if I was okay, to lend a helping hand, to give support. I didn't have a shoulder to cry on. So all of these things were confusing and devastating in my life. That gave way to low self-esteem, low self-worth, and self-sabotage. And why is that? Because after my father's passing is when my mother's chronic untreated mental illness really started to kick in. And it was an unstable household. She was coming and going. She was very violent at some times and very loving at others. So it was like, okay, what is it going to be now? What am I going to say? What am I going to do for her to implode? And my mother was in that horrible state. Fast forward again to this day, and I understand why she did this and why she didn't seek help, because it was taboo, because it was stereotyped, because mental illness in those times was your life is over kind of thing. And she was terrified about it. I remember I lived around mental illnesses my entire natural life. My mother wasn't the only one with mental illness. I had aunties, I had uncles. It was like a family affair of chronic mental illnesses, and most of them went untreated. But the ones that were treated, oh, that was the only definition of crazy. The ones that end up in the mental institution, those are the crazy ones. That is so far away from the truth here. This is what I noticed about my aunties and uncles that had chronic mental illnesses where they were treated. They will receive medication. It was a horse tranquilizer, because they will be either sleeping all the time like a zombie. They were zombie-likes, and when they stop their medication, they will become something else. All their issues will come back with a bang. So I grew up not only with the instability of my mother's actions, but being around uncles and aunts that were in the same exact situation, just different individual. If there's something that really traumatized me in my childhood, was when one of my uncles was in the institution. My mother, in her mental state, she will take us to visit him at the psychiatric ward. That was terrifying in my life. I saw a lot of things. I smelled a lot of things in that psychiatric ward. And I was like, why am I here? To this day, I don't wish this on no one. Thank goodness things are different now. It's a whole different mindset. But little by little, I kept on growing isolated. When I was sexually assaulted for the first time at 9 years old, there was a lot of taboo when it came to sexuality. And I didn't have any comprehension of what sexuality meant at that time in my life. When this invasiveness, this violation of myself happen, I felt ashamed. I felt lost. I felt like somehow I was responsible for this because it happened. It wasn't the only time that assault happened in my life. It happened many times during my life with different phases, a lot of sexual harassment in my life, in the job, in the street. It was like, why is it's happening over and over? So it was very repetitive in my life. That really took me to a place of self-destruction, self-destructive pattern because of my untreated childhood trauma. It's all started with the passing of my father, my mother's mental illness, being isolated, not being taken under consideration. I felt like my words were not worth anybody's attention. That took me on another path of, oh no, I got to do everything on my own because I am not worth anybody's time. How even more isolating these actions of mine can be. That's when it took me to my high school years, my teenage years. That is when the rebel with a cause and without a cause, I started trying drugs and alcohol. In my 20s, I was lost in those moments, but I felt like I had it all figured out because I was working, I went to school, I had an apartment, I was functional. I got this down to the T because I am efficient at my job and I am efficient at self-destruction. I was jumping from person to person, looking for something in the outside when all I needed to do is take a long lasting look in the mirror and find it from within. But this was something that I didn't learn anywhere. I didn't have the resources. I didn't have any help. Here we go again with my low self-esteem, low self-worth. I didn't believe I was worth it. Everything started changing when I became a mother. That was the second awakening, the second chance of life, because I started to get out of my self-pity bubble of the poor little me. I'm the victim of the world. Life has been so cruel to me. Life has been so unfair to me. I don't deserve what I have right now. Until I had my son. He's 26 years old now. I said, okay, these beings, my son and my daughter, I didn't give life to them. They gave me a second chance on coming back to life. Isn't that remarkable? It's phenomenal. It's a bit rebirth to me. So when I gave birth to my kids, I went through a rebirth myself, that's for sure. Going back to my father and my mother, wonderful human beings. They love humor. They love music. My father would dance to the beat of his drums. My mother was always a team player, even though she was going through such hardships in her own mind because her mind was her worst enemy. She manifested that through us. Unfortunately, we took the blunt of that, but still, I honor my mother and my father because they took chances in a place where there was no chances. There were hardly any chances for them to take. It's ironic, but I took that for the rest of my life. Till this day, I dance to the beat of my own drum too. I am a team player. I'm a go-getter. I will not give up. And when my mother will say, we keep on going, just remember, we keep on going. Yes, we do keep on going. That is a fact.
I can empathize with some of those things. They're very similar patterns that happened in my life, especially with sexual assault. I'm curious to know, how did you begin the process of healing from this trauma? And at what point did you realize you could use your experiences to help others?
The beginning of it all happened when I became a licensed massage therapist. When I went to school for massage therapy, that was a whole new door of information, knowledge, because knowledge is power, but the application of the knowledge is the real power. When I went to massage therapy school, I started learning about alternative health, about having other ways to heal, not only physically, but emotionally, and how massage therapy is such a powerful tool to help us heal in more ways than one. Why is this? Because our stress levels, the cortisol hormone, goes down 31%, and our happy chemicals of our bodies, these effects go up by 30% just with one session of massage therapy. When I really started learning about human anatomy, how amazingly and beautifully engineered our bodies are, and how the combination body, mind, and spirit, they're not separate entities. They are intertwined and they work as a team. Big example of this is the big S word, stress. The effects of emotional stress, the effects it has in our bodies, the effect that has even in our guts, our emotions, how we react to certain things. Stress changes everything. When I went to school, I graduated, I became a licensed massage therapist. I started to work on tens of thousands of people through this beautiful career that I'm not only a practitioner, but I receive massage on a consistent basis because it always does my body good. I reset by receiving massage. So as much as being a giver, I started to embrace the gift of receiving, because in my world, since I am a healer, I always been a helper since I was a little kid. So what do we helpers do? What do we healers tend to do? We take care of everybody else except ourselves. I went through that pattern and it lasted a long time. It took me like, I don't know, after 9 years of massage therapy, I had my first massage. So yes, I was the helper, the healer, but I wasn't applying those practices to myself, which is the biggest rooting of being a wounded healer. That came years later with self-reflection, healing, counseling, books, group therapy. I did everything in my power to start my healing journey and understand the wounds are not my fault, but the healing is my responsibility. Once I started diving into that fact, the healing is my responsibility, and the biggest investment we do is in ourselves, that definitely started to really pave the way until what I do today, until where I am as a human being, as a soul in the healing journey, because the healing journey never ends. This is a lifelong thing, especially when I carried my childhood trauma for so long. It was 47 years of silence, not speaking about it, not sharing my sorrow, not sharing my darkness, not sharing my loneliness. It took a chapter in a book for everybody to start knowing my real story. This big challenge, blessing, and miracle of writing a chapter came to me, and it wasn't random. It was part of the plan all along. When I receive an offer, I receive an email asking me, "Hey, Blanca, do you have a compelling story that you could share with the world?" And I'm like, damn, oh my God, do I have a compelling story? I believe I do. And I said, I'm going to do this interview. What do I have to lose? Absolutely nothing. It was supposed to be a 30-minute interview. It went into an hour. I was crying. The interviewer was crying. I was chosen. And it took me 6 months of my life to write 2,000 words, because I had to compact my life journey into 2,000 words in a chapter in a book. I said, if I am going to make it a compelling story, I'm going to really make it impactful. That is when I revisited my trauma, my loneliness, my abandonment, my self-destructive patterns, my self-sabotage, because I did it all to myself. Nobody is responsible for my actions but me. And it was time to stop blaming others for my demise, because I could have easily gone a whole different other way and not even be here with you having a conversation today. I was heading straight that path. Some good angels from above decided that, nah, you're going to come back with them. You are going to make this work. You are going to make it a mission, make it impactful, make it significant, because we are worth it. When I started to find self-worth in my life and build a beautiful relationship with myself, which is the most important relationship we have in this life, everything started to shift. I pivoted. I started shining with my own light. I believe in my mission more and more. That's when I took the rooting of my massage therapy career into being a healer, being a helper, helping others improve their quality of life. And once I pivoted into help myself improve my own quality of life, that is when Wounded Healer came into play. It's the most important mission I have in this life, the most significant thing I ever done. It's something that is bigger than myself, that it doesn't have so much to do with me anymore. It has to do with helping others through my story of darkness, through my story of going downhill, in a spiral downhill. It lasted for years and years. Let's remember, it was 47 years of silence, holding in those wounds, holding that big black spider and overshadowing my soul with my thoughts, with my change of thought. This is the thing. Change is beautiful. Change is a constant. From the moment of conception to the moment of our passing, we are changing. Change is human. Change is like breathing. Change is like sleeping. Change is there no matter what. Once we change our mindsets, our lives really do change. And this is not a cliche. This is the pure reality. Once we revisit and get out of that comfort zone, we get into habits. We are beings of habits. We build habits. And the same way we build a habit, let's say of drug usage, like I did for a very long time, having bottles and bottles of vodka and wine all the time. That was a habit that I built with time. And the same way I build that habit is, okay, this is the same way that I'm going to build a habit of walking away from that and facing the music for real. And dance to a beat, to a better drum, to a beautiful music of healing, of growth, of change, of shining with my own light, of stepping into my power and not allowing my past define my present or my future. A big part of my healing was confronting myself about sexual assault and sexual harassment and how I was going to deal with this from now on. And what I did was this. I step into my power and I stopped taking the crap from anybody. I spoke up because what I used to do from the first time that I was assaulted, I shut my mouth and I didn't say anything to anybody for decades. When these things happen and we don't learn the lesson and we don't change the narrative, it'll keep revisiting you over and over until you learn the lesson and change the narrative. Then it's when beautiful things happen, because I'm still a massage therapist almost 21 years later of massaging. And one of the easiest scenarios to go through sexual harassment is having a naked person on a table and people thinking thoughts that have nothing to do with me. So what do I do now? If in the slightest sight that I think that somebody's going to get out of line, is no, I'm stopping you right here, right now. Get off the table. Bye. Have a nice life. Or we can take it a little further and prosecute you. I don't have a problem with that. Before, that wasn't my story. My story was the one of silence. My story was the one of shame, the one of guilt. I was responsible for the actions of others. And no, I never was responsible for it. But my responsibility is to be here now telling people. And yes, for those of you who are on the back, step into your power. You got this. Change is a constant and we are all capable of change. And please embrace change. It's a beautiful thing.
It's interesting. The literature supports everything that you're talking about. It shows that ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences, can have a profound and lasting effect on mental and physical health well into adulthood. There are many landmark studies that demonstrated strong correlations between adverse childhood experiences and various negative health outcomes, including depression, anxiety, and substance abuse, and chronic physical conditions. What do you think are the most critical factors in determining whether someone overcomes childhood trauma or continues to struggle with its effects?
we can learn so much from other people's experiences and other people's stories. Right now, one of the very important hats that I use at this moment is I work as a massage therapist for 2 rehab centers for drug addiction and alcohol abuse. This is one of the most important missions that I had in my massage therapy career. I've always been into wellness, into the medical field. That has been my niche when it came to massage therapy. When I got this offered, I jumped into it immediately because I was in both sides of that story. The only thing that happened is that I didn't land in a rehab center, which I should have at that moment, but it didn't happen that way. The universe helped me get the help I so very much needed and deserved through other sources of information, which is a beautiful thing. But when I landed this job, all I have to do as a massage therapist is say, how are you feeling today? And the stories started to blossom. And they all say the same thing. I am stressed. I am falling apart. How powerful those words are. I am stressed and falling apart. There is many women, especially, they have issues with their reproductive system. Isn't that something? Because of sexual assault, because of being violated in that way. I have had reproductive system issues in the past while I was in my pregnancies. But after I started this healing journey, I started improving. I used to have intensely painful periods, and it was part of my past. Definitely. That comes hand in hand. This body, mind, spirit connection is undeniable. And then there is a lot of gentlemen. And this is when I appreciate rehab centers so much. I haven't been in an environment where there's so much honesty. Nobody has anything to lose. Nobody has anything to hide because they hit rock bottom. They are there for a reason. This is when the beauty in the mess comes out. It's when I find the treasure in that trash, because rehab centers are horrific, chaotic environments. These are people that abandon themselves. These are people that are homeless. These are people that work in high places, multimillionaires, high-end doctors, people that work in the Pentagon, anesthesiologists, and they succumb. They went down that rabbit hole as well. When it comes to social stature and financial independence or not, it makes no difference because all of them land in a place where the addiction is not the problem. That is just the icing on the cake. The rooting of addiction is so much deeper than that. I can attest to that. When it comes to the body-mind connection, assault, abuse, childhood trauma, PTSD, anxiety, all of these go down to the rooting of untreated childhood trauma. It goes down to the rooting of trauma. In the 2.5 years that I've been there, I have treated 6,200 people with massages. It goes down to the root of the matter, which is trauma. And many of them, they've been sexually abused and they try to sugarcoat it with drugs, with alcohol, like I did. It never take us absolutely anywhere because once the numbness and the high passes, you go straight back. You go straight back to the trauma. You even feel worse because then you carry the guilt of being an addict and being a burden to the family, plus the trauma that you already carry with you. And yes, the physical and the emotional, they are hand in hand. Just like stress. What happens with stress? I'm anxious, you get heart palpitations, you can get high blood pressure, you can have migraines, your shoulders go all the way up to the roof, and you can even have gastrointestinal issues that can lead to ulcers, that can lead to cancers. Stress can lead to cardiac arrest, strokes, the same exact way with trauma. It can lead us to massive, major issues, let's say breast cancer. Yes, because that's a very delicate area that you don't want to mess around. And women that have been sexually assaulted, they end up with ulcers in their reproductive system. They end up with breast cancer, and it's because of the childhood trauma they carry. So yes, the body-mind connection, it's undeniable. That's for sure.
There's a psychic residue that is being held onto. It's what Jung calls the armoring, the psychic residue they pile on as a protective defense mechanism. I wanted to touch on resilience and protective factors. In my research, the literature shows while the impact of childhood trauma can be severe, not all individuals who experience trauma develop long-term mental issues. Factors such as social support, cognitive flexibility, and access to mental health resources, things like massage, they've all been identified as potential protective factors that promote resilience. What role do you believe resilience plays in overcoming childhood trauma?
To me, resilience is what took me to where I am today. The phrase, not giving up, facing myself, taking a long, good look at that mirror. The mirror and me, we had a very dysfunctional relationship since I was a little girl. I've been doing professional dancing for over 40 years. I'm still a teacher to this day. And it's a beautiful thing that in my late 50s, here I am, I'm still teaching. And I teach people 55 plus. I teach even people that are younger than me. And like, wow, this is a huge blessing. The relationship with the mirror, I used to enjoy rehearsals, looking at myself, expressing my talent, putting my makeup on in my younger years. And that was it. I would never take a long, close look at that human being in front of me, screaming at me, do something about it. You are a resilient person. You have survived all these years, and it's for a powerful reason. Get your crap done. And when we get out of our comfort zone of the pity party, the low self-esteem, the things that we are used to, is what we know, is what we've been growing up with. It's what we call the law of familiarity. We feel we are too comfortable with what we know, even if it's the worst thing that can happen to us. This is when trauma comes into place. Mental illnesses ensue. Resilience is powerful. It can be heavy, the word resilience, because when resilience is put into full manifestation, this is a bumpy road, but I'm not going to give it up. This is when resiliency is one of those words that everybody should embrace at some point in their lives or for their entire lifetimes, because it makes a difference. It makes the process easier to cope with. Resiliency, persisting, not giving up. I got this. Oh my goodness, that phrase, I got this. How life-changing is this phrase? The one person making this phrase even more famous right now is back in the Olympics a month ago with this American gymnast, Simone Biles. The cameras will be all over her before competition, and she will be saying to herself, I got this, I got this, I got this, I got this. And Simone, thank you so much. I love that phrase, and I'm using it myself. Definitely. I am enough. I got this. That's one of those phrases that are so empowering, and they can go in hand with resiliency because it opens our minds to bigger things to come. It opens us up to the bigger picture. Don't close yourself up into you cannot do this, because that is not true. Be kind to your mind. Make that conversation with yourself as healthy as possible, because we are our own worst critics. We are our own worst enemies with our internal self-talk. The more we improve internal self-talk, the better our lives will be. And resiliency has everything to do with, okay, I'm going to be resilient. I'm going to keep on creating these good habits that help me grow, help me be better, help me with my persistence, and help me be resilient. Why not improve the most important relationship we have in our lives, the one with ourselves? Resiliency is your best friend. Don't let go of resiliency, because it will help you with anything that you go through in life.
That's well said. You are instructing your faculty by repetitive phrases like I've got this, and making those actions by coding your neural pathways. In effect, what you are doing is you're redirecting neuroplasticity.
Absolutely.
That helps build resilience too. Like you said earlier, knowledge is power, but without action, it's useless. You've got to humanize it into application. I want to touch on intergenerational transmission of trauma, because there's growing evidence, and I'd love to get your insights on this, because you have a lot of experience, especially with massaging over 6,200 people. There's growing evidence the effects of trauma can be passed down through generations, and not just through learned behaviors, but potentially through epigenetic changes. Now, this understanding that's coming more into the fore is it has significant implications for the approach to healing and prevention. In your experience, how do you see the concept of intergenerational trauma playing out in families and communities? What are your thoughts on the potential biological mechanisms of trauma transmission? Sorry, there was
Yes,
two questions there.
yeah. Oh, that's fine. That's fine. I love it. I love it. I can tell you this, and I am a very curious being. I love to do research, and it is proven that brains are developed differently when we go through trauma, childhood trauma specifically. I can give you the story, my own story of generational trauma being passed from generation to generation. My mother, God bless her, she grew up in extreme poverty. My grandmother grew up in extreme poverty, being malnourished, abused, neglected, abandoned. My mother was one of 9 brothers and sisters, big, huge families, living in extreme poverty, going to school barefooted. My mother had a mission in her life. When she gets to be a mother, her kids are not going to go through what she went through, which is a beautiful thing. And she conquered. And she definitely delivered when it comes to that. But her trauma of being neglected by her own mother was definitely passed on into our generation. Sister, brother, and I, through the form of chronic, untreated mental illness. And the way she tried to manage the passing of my father or not manage it well, this was a huge mismanagement. She didn't know any better, but it was generational trauma that she passed on to us. Definitely, without a doubt. And we learn all too well about that so-called comfort zone of being into drama, tragedy. Everybody is bad. Don't trust anybody. You can only do things yourself. Nobody in this world is there for you. Nobody is good enough for you. That was generational trauma that my mother passed into us. How do we go into the next generation? By cutting that umbilical cord from the root. I experienced decades of being in the pity party, trying to manipulate everybody into I want attention, I crave attention, and I cannot get enough attention because I want to manipulate you into giving me more attention. That was my mother's generation. That ended with my mother's generation. That is for sure, without a doubt. The relationship I have with my mother, definitely, it could have gone another way. My mother really don't know me that well, that is for sure, but that is the path that she chose for her kids because she was too lost into being overprotective, being in this tyranny. She wanted, poor thing, she wanted us to be her property. That is when things really took a turn for the worse. We walked away. There was years I didn't have any communication with her. So those years in my 20s, she has no clue what was I doing with my life. There is so many things that I would have loved to share with my mother. It was her responsibility, not mine. I was the kid. She was the mother. So I go into the next generation, which are my kids. My son is 26 years old. My daughter just turned 23 years old. We have an amazing, open relationship. When our kids grow, they are under no obligation to keep in touch with us. That is the reality. My kids want to be with me. My kids want me to visit Wisconsin. My kids want my presence. My daughter, she went into a music festival that is full of youngsters last year. And she said, Mom, you want to go? And I'm like, yeah, I'll go up. I planted that seed and I make sure that beautiful oak tree started to grow and grow. And understand that forgiveness really is the heart of the matter. I am not the perfect mother. I was dealing with my skeletons in that closet. They were banging while I was raising my kids in an environment that it was full with domestic abuse. That was their childhood, but that didn't define them. That didn't define me. I went to them and I apologized profusely for my mistakes. They had nothing to do with it. It was my responsibility, and I was dealing with my demons. It's a beautiful thing as a parent, from one parent to the other. All of you parents out there, show vulnerability, show your weakness, do yourself a favor, grow with your kids, grow for your kids. I grow for myself and I grow for them, and we grow together. It's a beautiful thing. And this is when this generational cycle of dysfunction, of sadness, of tragedy, of abandonment, neglect, mental illnesses, keeping the mouth shut. This is taboo. Don't talk about the dead. Don't talk about bad things. That went out the door with my mother's generation, not with this generation, not with the next generation. My daughter has mental illness as well. She has general anxiety disorder. She has depression, and she still lives her life as stable, as healthy as possible, because we are open about these conversations that are so vital for bonding between parent and kid. I respect my kids' boundaries. Respect your kids' boundaries. Stop treating your 26 years old like he's 9, because it's not the truth. You got to treat them with respect, giving them the value they deserve, seeking their opinion, seeking their help. Don't be lost in the sauce. Oh, I am the older one and I know everything, because that used to be my mother's generation. I'm old enough and you're the kid, and I will always look down at you because you're the kid. No. The kid can teach you a lot. I learned so many things from the younger generations. When I have an issue with my computer, who do I go to? My son, because my son will help me with this. When I need anything from them both, I go to them for help. They appreciate that. They embrace that. They feel special. The bond grows. This is when the generational trauma that I had before my kids, my mother's generational trauma that she had before me, before herself, this umbilical cord has been cut off, and we are all capable of stopping that vicious cycle of generational trauma. It's a beautiful thing. It is worth it, and your relationships will shine. I see my 2 adult kids keep on shining and growing from who they used to be to what they are now. So generational trauma can really be cut off. Remember that change is constant, and change is beautiful, and change is really here to stay.
That's so well said. And there are many cultural considerations in trauma and mental health. I prefer to call it mental well-being. Cultural factors play a significant role in how trauma is experienced, expressed, and treated. Many different cultures have varying definitions of trauma and different attitudes towards treatment of mental health. How can mental health professionals, massage therapists, or people within the healing domain become more culturally competent in addressing childhood trauma?
Being open-minded is the most important, vital thing as a healer, as a massage therapist, because I have worked with people from all walks of life and from all cultural backgrounds. I am in the Latino community. The Latino culture can be very rigid and very traumatic as well. There are things, especially men and women, it's like a whole different ballgame, one from the other. Us women are supposed to grow up to be, if you are a good woman, you take care of everybody else first, and then you are last. If you are a good woman, you will take that bullet and lay yourself to die because you are a good woman. That is what a good woman is. A good woman submits herself to whatever it is that comes to her because you're a good woman. So remember that a woman puts herself last if you're good. Okay, if you're a woman, good wealth and good intentions, you're last in the list. With men, it's a whole different ballgame. I remember when my father died, what was the first idiotic phrase that was told to my poor brother? You're the man of the house now. How a 9-year-old is going to become the man of the house now upon his beloved father's death? That was traumatic for my brother. I know that is for sure. There's other cultures because I have seen people from all over the world and from different religious backgrounds as well. That makes the opinions really differ one from the other. Here in Florida, this is the retirement state of the US. All the retirees, they love Florida for whatever reason that may be. So I have a lot of retirees that have a whole different perspective on what these conversations are about. They were the hippies in the 60s. I'm a flower child and everything is flower and we're easygoing and we have mushrooms and we had all of this stuff. And I used to go to the beach with my kids since they were 3 years old and we do this together. Hey, that's wonderful. Good for you. And then there are the rigid ones that they are very similar to the Latino culture, which is the woman submits and the man will prevail. So you can see just with my body language how women submit. You go roll in the cocoon and feel small versus the man being the powerful one, the tyrant, so to speak. He's the one in command and women had no saying. I grew up, they tried to indoctrinate me into that, but it never worked. I dance to the beat of my own drum is, yeah, whatever. That's not the path I'm choosing. When it comes to other cultures, here in the US is the Southern culture versus the Northern States culture versus California culture versus Massachusetts and New York culture is remarkable. I have never seen anything like that. I come from a small island that everybody have the same mentality, so to speak. So the California culture, these are the flower people. They are really into doing things in a more democratic way. Everybody's welcome versus the Southern states that they are close-minded. Hey, no offense to my Southerners, I love you all, but there is a lot of homophobia, a lot of racism, and it's so palpable and it's so sad. I have bite my tongue many times in session because as a massage therapist, you're there to help this person with their massage needs. And people say many things. The diversity of cultures really is a major factor on how generational trauma can happen or not. So it's a very important thing to keep in mind. I have met people from India and in the Middle East till this day. Women hey, you know what? You're going to marry this one. But I don't know this person. I don't care. You're going to marry this person. That is another cultural shock that is so traumatic for so many. And this is done till this day. I know this lovely woman, and she is from Saudi Arabia. She's young, my daughter's age. There were so many rules that were instilled in her. Guess what? She doesn't like men from the Middle East. She's been living in the US for a few years already. And it was like, make a decision. Or you choose your family or you choose your American Oriental boyfriend. She went her own way. Unfortunately, that's when family ties are broken because of these limiting beliefs, because they are limiting. Me as a mother, you go ahead and you do whatever you want. Because in my culture, when I was in my younger years, it was something pretty similar. My mother was very much a racist and it was into homophobia, into her mental illness. It was really challenging to see that. I was like, you know what? I don't relate to anything you're telling me. And whoever I am with, I don't care about race, color, where you come from, what's your background. I don't care about that. If we love each other and respect each other, that's what matters to me. But it was very challenging with me and my culture, and now me as a massage therapist seeing other cultures that have a lot of similarities. And here we go again with the limiting beliefs. Definitely.
You wear many hats, from being a holistic life coach, and you practice massage, and you're a Zumba dance teacher. You do many things. But one of the things that really struck me when I visited your website, one of the words that jumped out at me on the Wounded Healer website was vulnerability. In human relationships, vulnerability fosters authenticity and intimacy. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable with others, we create a space for genuine connection. We have to be open to sharing our fears and insecurities and failures, and we can move beyond superficial interactions to form deep bonds. in my experience, being authentic builds trust and encourages others to be open in return. All the research shows that vulnerability is key in healthy, lasting relationships, whether personal or professional. Brene Brown says that vulnerability is not about weakness, but about courage, the courage to show up, be seen, and risk emotional exposure. Why do you think vulnerability is essential for authentic relationships?
To me, vulnerability is power. And like you said, it shows who we really are. It shows our weaknesses. It shows where we come from. It shows that we're not perfect. It shows that we've been down that rabbit hole and we've been through failure. We take it as a lesson. Failure is a failure without a lesson. Those two come together hand in hand. And that's when vulnerability, to me, is one of the most powerful tools we can possess. I learned this, of course, with Brene Brown, how she opened up people's minds. Vulnerability is not a sin. Vulnerability is not taboo. Vulnerability is not a bad thing. In this human experience, everybody has vulnerable moments. Everybody has vulnerable seasons in their lives. We can have a lot of weakness, but we can build strength upon weakness. And in vulnerability, we build a lot of power and the power to be our authentic selves. That's when vulnerability is not taboo. Vulnerability is not ugly. When I developed my website that says vulnerability is power, to some it was not well received because you're not supposed to be vulnerable. And it's okay. Everybody is different. You don't have to be liked by everybody. And that's okay with me. I'm totally fine with that. But when it came to vulnerability, it's like, how dare you say that vulnerability is power? No, that's showing you can fall down. That's showing that you can fail. I have fallen down many times and I have failed many times in my life. So why not share this reality in this world that is going so fast? With social media, the information is too fast. You got 3 to 4 seconds to create an impact on someone, to have anybody's attention. In a world where these so-called influencers, all they want is to give you a fake and shallow vision. Perfect is an illusion. Perfect is not real in this human experience. We are beings of imperfection. We may have perfect intentions, and then again, your perfect intention may have nothing to do with the perfect intention of these other person. That's why perfect an illusion and a fantasy to want to be perfect. And that is when so much pressure is created in these people that their walls keep closing, trying to pretend they are not vulnerable. And this is when suicidal rates have gone up to the roof. Because the pressure of trying to be perfect, of trying to have a beautiful life 24/7, that is when tragedy strikes. And this is when so many of us are here to show the world and share with the world that no, be vulnerable, show weakness. There's nothing wrong with crying. There's nothing wrong with being angry. There's nothing wrong with making mistakes because we are beings of imperfection. So yes, vulnerable, that's one of my favorite words in my life. The kind of work that I do today is vulnerability. And with my patients in the rehab centers, because they have nothing to hide to that point, they have gone so down and hit rock bottom so many times. With many hit rock bottom for the first time, for the second time, whatever the case may be, they start showing vulnerability. I'm going to share my vulnerability with you. And we connect. And it's a beautiful thing. Through vulnerability, so many of us can connect with each other and have an authentic conversation that can be equally helpful, because your experiences may be similar than mine, but we are different. We come from different backgrounds, from different places. And this is when we can connect in a beautiful way, share vulnerability, and learn from each other.
Continuing the theme of vulnerability, I want to look at personal growth because I think it's central to personal growth. Growth can only happen at the edge of your comfort zone. Being vulnerable means being open to uncertainty, to risk, as you mentioned earlier in the conversation, emotional exposure, which in my own experience leads to a level of personal development when we face fears and allow ourselves to be uncomfortable. We gain resilience and strength. And I think about the times when I've pushed through
Mhm.
a challenging situation, I've emerged stronger on the other side. Discomfort of vulnerability leads to breakthroughs in self-awareness and emotional intelligence. You can see this in leaders who embrace vulnerability. They inspire innovation and creativity within their teams as they model the importance of taking risks and learning from failure. Why is vulnerability, in your experience, crucial for personal development and self-awareness?
Showing our vulnerability. It's about getting out of the comfort zone, being vulnerable, and being resilient. They are a combo, and it's a beautiful orchestrated words and emotions of growth. The more we get out of our comfort zones, the better off we will be. I stayed in a comfort zone of silence for decades of my life. And in those moments in time, the rooting of my sorrow, of shame, stayed stagnant. What happens with water when it's stagnant? It stinks and it brings new bacteria and it brings new life that is not conducive to quality of life of the water. So when it comes to vulnerability, resiliency, and growth, that is to me and my experience is the way to go. And getting out of our comfort zones is vital. Improving our quality of life, for feeling better about ourselves, for getting out of shame, sorrow, low self-esteem, self-sabotage, self-destructive patterns. That's when getting out of our comfort zones can make a difference in the world. It's about rewiring our brains into something better for ourselves, because it's like changing that neuroplasticity. We're capable of it. And it doesn't matter what age we are, we're capable of this. One of the biggest changes in my life came in my 50s, in the middle of my menopause. There is this misconception of menopausal stages, especially for women. How demonized has menopause been in the Western world? Is you're in your menopause, you're screwed. You're going downhill. There's nothing else that you're going to do with your life. It's like, listen up, bro. I'm going to tell you something. I have done more progress in my life, in every single aspect of my life, in my 50s than my 20s, 30s, and 40s combined. When I was 38 years old and I went to school for massage therapy, that was the beginning of paving that road that has taken me to where I am today. Being vulnerable, sharing my story of low self-worth, being lost in myself, demonizing myself, not finding any worth in my life, believing that my word was not worth anybody's attention. How horrible it is to have a life like that, versus I am in my 50s and I keep on dancing to the beat of my own drum, but this drum became an orchestra, a symphonic orchestra of beautiful different instruments that I picked up, and I actually used them for the better good of myself. Keep on building this beautiful relationship that I have with myself. The more beautiful relationships I'm building with my now husband. We've been 11 years married. I found my best friend in the form of a beautiful American man from Massachusetts. We started as friends, and he is still my best friend to this day, but we're happily married. Wow, who would have known? All of my relationships before him were a disaster. We're full of domestic abuse, insults, ignorance, and it was a two-way road. I am not saying it's like I'm the victim of the situation, poor little me. No, that was in the past, that I thought that I was everybody's victim. No, I have full participation in this vicious circle, the crazy eight of being the victim, the pity party, not being worth anybody's time. It goes straight back to childhood trauma. But then we fast forward again into my 40s and 50s, this era of growth, of redefining who I am, of stepping into my power and saying, yeah, girl, you can kick ass, definitely. And in more ways than one, not only as a dancer, not only as a skilled massage therapist, that I am a master at my craft, but at other aspects of my life as well. helping others improve their quality of lives through my own story of vulnerability, of loss, of falling down into stepping into that power, picking up those pieces and using them as lessons of growth and change into the woman and the human being that I am today, into the mother, friend, wife, daughter, sister, helper that I am today. So definitely, people, don't give up. Don't do it alone. Do yourself a favor. Don't do like me. Don't do it alone.
I also see this is a huge subject that we can't cover in an hour's podcast, but I want to touch on the fact that I see vulnerability as a valuable tool for building empathy. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, and this I'm talking from direct experience, we can develop greater empathy towards others when we share our struggles and acknowledge our imperfections that make us more understanding of the challenges others face. In a sense, vulnerability humanizes us. Vulnerability gives you assistance to bridge the emotional gap between people from different backgrounds or life experiences. I remember working with one CEO. He was totally armored. Vulnerability, like you explained earlier, was seen as weak. After some time, when the kabuki screen came down, he started to express vulnerability. He became more relatable, more approachable. That enhanced his ability to inspire, touch, move, and motivate others by revealing his struggles. He cultivated a culture of empathy and compassion within his business that promoted collaboration and mutual support. Can you think of a time when someone's vulnerability helped you understand their perspective better?
Yes, absolutely. I had this amazing patient. She was 79 years old at the time and showed vulnerability in the form of the loss of her 42-year marriage. She lost her husband to cancer. She was 19 years old when she married him. All of those decades later, it was a whole different mindset of the man is the provider and he takes care of all the bills. He took care of absolutely everything that had to do with bills, payments, mortgages, the whole thing. He left this woman set for the rest of her life. She didn't have to worry about finances. She took care of the household in the form of raising the kids, the grandkids, and she was like the housewife. When this man passed away, she was crying on my table for a year and a half. She was crying every single time that she will come to session. And this is what happens with massage therapy. The stress chemical cortisol goes down by 31%, and the happy chemicals in the bodies, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins, those chemicals levels goes up, and vulnerability happened. She didn't stop crying for a year and a half, and it wasn't only about crying, it was about telling her story of her marriage with her husband, how happy she was. She has stability. Stability was everything. She didn't really know about the instability and going to the emotional up and down of going through the loss of her loved one, not knowing what finances are all about, how to handle much more than just being with the grandkids because the kids are already all grown up. She was alone in Florida in her house without the physical support of her kids and grandkids. The grandkids are growing up to be teenagers. They're not so attached to grandma anymore. So when this man passed away, her world crumbled. And she showed vulnerability of her world crumbling down, and on a weekly basis, her telling me a new story of how am I going to do to go to the bank? I don't even know about the finances. I don't even know what am I going to do without him. He will be driving me everywhere. And when his cancer took hold, she became the driver. She had to get in that driver's seat. That seat she never had. She was always in the passenger seat. But little did she know that she was more in the driver's seat than she could have ever imagined. A year and a half later, after her crying, after her devastation, after going through all of those stages of grief and loss, she said, you know what? It's time for me to get a boyfriend. 79 years old. And I was like, oh my goodness, with this lady, how are you coming out of your shell? She showed her vulnerability upon a great loss of her adoring, loving husband, the only man that she had in her life, versus coming out of that shell and saying, okay, I am ready to move on now. I learned everything about finances. I went to the friend of a friend. He's a financial advisor, and she started to go to the right sources of information for help. She decided to stop trying to do everything on her own as she was indoctrinated into doing. Let's remember, she is old school. She is the lady that does everything for others first, and she is the last one in the list. To transforming into a 79, 80-year-old woman, 80 years old. This is remarkable. Transforming into, I have the driver's seat and I like it. She went to dating sites. She had ups and downs. She dated people. She said, no, I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't want nobody to depend on me because I have everything I need. And whoever I'm going to have from now on, he's going to have his own home. I have my home. You pay your bills. I pay my bills. And we meet halfway. What she manifested, it came all a reality. She has a lovely boyfriend of over 6 years. He's in his 70s too. He has his place. She has her place. They go on vacation quite a few times a year, and they meet for dinner. When she wants to be with her girlfriends playing mahjong, she does that as well. This is a beautiful story of showing vulnerability and stepping into her power through years of going through loss, read down that rabbit hole of sorrow. What am I going to do with my life without this man? And blossoming into building better quality of life for herself at 80 years old. That's a beautiful story. She has no idea how much she taught me about showing vulnerability, because vulnerability really is power.
Beautiful story. I'm respectful of your time. I don't know whether you want to do a part two, because there's much more I'd like to talk to you
I would
about
love to.
in terms of integrating wounds and gifts and looking at the ethics of massage and many other things. Do you have any parting words? And where can people find you if they want to learn more about you?
Oh, yes, absolutely. You can find me on my website at www.wombdeadhealer.us. And for all of our listeners here today, I want to offer you the gift of one session of life coaching with myself. Let's make it happen. Don't do it alone. Don't do what I did. Don't do it alone. The support is there. You just need to reach out and we will be there for you. And of course, please do yourself a favor. Accept the fact that change is a constant, change is here to stay. We can do so many good things with change because change is beautiful. Vulnerability is power. Please don't forget, the wounds are not your fault, but the healing is your responsibility. Thank you.
How have you experienced the conversation today?
Oh my God, I love it. I absolutely love it. I love conversations that can really help others with their life, with their process, with whatever they're going through, to understand that through my loneliness and all of my silence that I endured through so many years, it's good to learn the lesson that if I started talking 30 years ago, I don't know where my life would have been. It wasn't the plan for me. Whatever decisions were made helped me to pave the way into where I am today. So I take it as a lesson and I take it as growth. I don't take it as failure. Failure means growth. We take failures, we learn the lesson from them, and we really do move on in life. That is basically the biggest message that I can give here. It's a big part of my mission to help others improve their quality of life, whether it is life coaching, fitness, writing a book about it, speaking to the masses about it, and showing that, no, I'm not perfect. I don't want to be perfect. I have no interest in being perfect. There is beauty when we age. I love my age. I love aging gracefully. I have a beautiful friend that she says, no, I am like wine. I'm aging gracefully. And I am adopting that phrase. I'm going to make it my own because, yes, we do age gracefully if we choose to do so. Please, people, don't let age be a defining moment of what you're going to do in life because the possibilities are endless. Always look forward.
Wise counsel. Thank you so much for sharing your gifts, Blanca.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you.